In all my years inside this family, I have never seen a behavior as disgraceful as Meghan Markle's. Those were Sophie's exact words in a recent interview, and they hit the royal family like a grenade, but she was nowhere near finished.
Fortunately, the pandemic has slightly slewed things, and as much as it's hard to spend as much time, the immediate loss isn't necessarily felt in the same way.
She ripped open secrets Meghan had fought tooth and nail to keep buried forever. The calculated and deeply disturbing way Meghan forced her way into the royal family. The shocking flirtation she directed at William that left him sick to his stomach. And the real reason Meghan ran from the royal family. A truth so ugly that it destroys every single story the public was fed. Everything you believed was a carefully constructed lie. And Sophie just exposed everything. The woman who wore the wrong crown. On April 1st, 2026, a short video clip exploded across the internet, and the royal world was never going to be the same again. Sophie had looked straight into the camera and called Meghan a cheap flirt who will do anything to get any man she wants. Just minutes after the video surfaced, something strange happened. They started getting deleted. Accounts were wiped and links were killed. But it was already too late, because some people had watched every second of it. And what they had watched was Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, sitting on camera and shredding Meghan Markle in a way no senior royal had ever had the nerve to do publicly. The April Fool's timing gave desperate people something to grab onto. Surely it was a prank. Surely someone was having a laugh at the nation's expense. But by noon, the people who had seen the clip were not laughing. They were furiously saving copies and swearing in their thousands that every frame was real. Some insisted the footage had been modified by AI, but that argument kept falling apart against one stubborn fact. What Sophie said in that clip was too specific to be a lie. To make matters worse for everyone hoping it was a joke, rumors began tearing through social media that a senior palace representative had quietly put out a statement confirming that Sophie's remarks aligned with the long-standing standards of conduct the royal family demanded from its members. According to those rumors, the palace was standing fully behind every word she said. Sophie had been chosen deliberately as the one voice in that household that nobody could convincingly paint as bitter, jealous, or personally threatened. And when you understand who Sophie really was, that choice made complete and devastating sense. Sophie had not been born into royalty. She had clawed her way to respect inside the institution the hardest way possible. In the early 2000s, she nearly lost everything after being secretly recorded, making damaging comments about some of the most powerful people in Britain. She called the Queen an old dear. She said the royal family found Tony Blair too presidential and could not stand him. And then she said something about Camilla that landed like a grenade. She said the public would never accept Camilla as queen. She said a marriage between Charles and Camilla would be impossible for as long as the Queen Mother was alive. She said it to someone she believed she could trust. That person was an undercover reporter, and the moment those words hit the press, the scandal nearly swallowed her whole. But Sophie did not run. She stepped back, accepted every consequence that came, said she deeply regretted her misjudgment, and then spent the next 20 years doing the one thing that nobody expected from her. She rebuilt herself, quietly, completely, through relentless work and total discipline until she became one of the most trusted and respected voices inside the entire royal household. So, when someone like that makes a comment about Meghan, it just has to be true. What Sophie laid out in that clip was a case built on documented incidents and years of direct first-hand observation. And at the center of it all sat a claim that blew apart everything the public thought it understood about the Sussex story. Meghan Markle had not come to the royal family to build a life with Harry. She had arrived with a target already locked in, and that target was never the Sussex title. She was never looking at the Sussex title. In the months between Harry's proposal and the wedding, Meghan quietly requested a private meeting with Catherine. It was granted, and according to sources with direct knowledge of what happened in that room, Meghan showed up with a proposal. She wanted the four of them, William, Catherine, Harry, and herself, to operate as a unified brand with equal billing and shared decision-making across all public engagement. Catherine, who understood with absolute clarity where each member of the royal family stood within the institution's order, said no. She was polite about it, and the meeting was over. Meghan walked out in silence. Within weeks, the maneuvering began. Sources close to the household say that the meeting was the moment everything shifted. The formal route to equal standing had been slammed shut, so Meghan went looking for a different route entirely, not through the institution, but through the man who would one day stand at the top of it. "Something is not right here," Sophie told Edward after watching Meghan move through those early joint engagements. She was not looking at the role she was given. She was looking at the throne next to her. By the middle of 2018, the pattern was impossible to miss for anyone watching closely inside the household. At multiple official engagements, Meghan had been quietly repositioning herself away from Harry and into William's orbit. She was always, as Sophie described it, half a step closer to William than protocol allowed, seeking his eye contact, leaning toward him, working to build a visible closeness with the future king that had absolutely no business existing. Sophie called it what it was. It looked like an audition for the role of the woman beside him. Can you imagine the nerve of that? Then came the Royal Foundation Forum in January of 2019, and the mask came off completely. Meghan refused the pre-agreed seating arrangement and planted herself directly beside William instead of beside Harry. She spoke over Catherine during the panel and made sure her voice was the one the press carried away from the room. Backstage afterward, Catherine was in tears. "It was not just a disagreement about a speech," Sophie said. "It was a declaration of war on the hierarchy." Meghan had looked at Catherine's husband, at Catherine's future, at Catherine's crown, and decided she wanted a piece of it. And Sophie wasn't the only one who had noticed. Others inside the palace walls had been quietly keeping tabs on Meghan's behavior around William, and the picture that was forming was one nobody inside the palace wanted to acknowledge out loud. What the palace was documenting in silence. At the Sandringham Christmas of 2017, before Harry and Meghan's engagement was even publicly confirmed, a senior household aide filed an internal memo recording that Meghan had twice broken proximity protocol with William during informal gatherings that weekend. No action was taken because she was not yet a member of the family, but that document existed, and when the exact same behavior continued after the wedding, that quiet memo became the first entry in what eventually grew into a full formal dossier. The palace had been building its case against Meghan before she even had a title. The first major incident in that dossier came 72 hours after Meghan married Harry. At a private garden event, she greeted William not with the standard formal acknowledgement, but with a lingering cheek kiss and a firm, prolonged grip on his forearm. William visibly stiffened and pulled back. Senior staff logged it that same day. Then, at a public engagement at Buckingham Palace in October of 2018, Meghan pressed her hand flat against William's back during a conversation, a gesture Sophie described as one that belongs between a spouse and a partner. William immediately shifted his body away from her. "It was a silent rejection of a boundary breach," Sophie said. "That should never have happened in the first place." At the 2019 polo match, the persistence became something uglier. Meghan kept leaning into William's personal space throughout the entire event and repeatedly bypassed Harry to address William directly with what Sophie called theatrical intimacy. "It was not just about a hug," Sophie said. "It was about what that hug was trying to say. It was an attempt to broadcast a closeness that did not exist, and a closeness that William absolutely did not want. What the public never knew was that the institution had already quietly built a wall around William. Sources familiar with the household describe an unwritten arrangement understood by William's personal staff that whenever Meghan and William were at the same informal event, a staff member was to stay in close physical proximity to the future king, not for security, but to act as a human barrier between William and his sister-in-law. And the moment Meghan understood that William was never going to bend, something inside her broke and turned vicious. It was no longer about getting closer to him. It became about making everyone who had watched her fail feel every ounce of the humiliation she was carrying. When the strategy failed, the destruction began. There was a moment in late 2019 where the atmosphere changed from difficult to dangerous, Sophie recalled. When she met the wall of William's duty, she did not retreat. She retaliated. Meghan's retaliation was quiet, methodical, and deliberate. She began by making sure that every direct line of communication Harry had with William's office was quietly severed, one connection at a time, until there was nothing left to sever. Requests for informal contact between the brothers came back with responses like, "Meghan says we are busy," or "Meghan feels we need space." Harry's relationship with his father was being strangled the same way. Charles had been reaching Harry through private channels, personal handwritten notes and phone calls made directly from his own private line to avoid going through staff. At least 3 of those attempts went unanswered for weeks before cold, formal replies arrived that Charles's own staff immediately recognized as having been written by someone other than Harry. The warmth was gone. The directness was gone. What came back read like something drafted in a lawyer's office. Those who were present when Charles read one such reply describe him going completely still. He folded the paper, put it away quietly, and never brought it up again. What do you do when you realize your own son is no longer the one writing back to you? She knew about the loss of his mother, the underlying trauma, the pressure of being the spare, Sophie said. She did not seek to heal those wounds. She played with them. She gave him joy, yes, but she also closed the door behind them and locked it from the inside. Like that was not enough already. The Archie christening in the summer of 2019 ripped open a wound that went straight to the Queen herself. Meghan refused the proposed photographers and refused to release the names of Archie's godparents publicly. When the Queen's private secretary sent a formal institutional request that the names be disclosed in line with royal tradition, Meghan's office flatly said no. The Queen, who had shown the Sussexes nothing but public grace at every turn, was described by those close to her as genuinely wounded. One person who was with her in the days following the christening said she looked older, as though something she had been holding back had finally broken through. It was a signal to the Queen, Sophie said, that the rules of the crown stopped at Meghan's front door. When Sophie reached out to Meghan privately in 2020, extending her hand as a fellow outsider who had survived her own public disaster and understood the price the institution demanded, Meghan's response was 8 words: "I have Harry. That is all I need." Meghan wanted an airtight grip on the one person she had successfully dragged away from everyone who had ever genuinely loved him. Then came the Oprah interview of March 2021, and the last bridge burned to ash. It was not a cry for help, Sophie said. It was a commercial launch for a brand built on the wreckage of the House of Windsor. Senior royals watched the broadcast together in real time inside the palace. When Meghan's claim aired that a family member had expressed concern about Archie's skin tone before his birth, one senior royal stood up and walked out of the room without a single word. When the broadcast ended, nobody spoke for several minutes. Within 24 hours, a decision had been made at the very top of the institution. The Sussex situation was no longer a family wound to be quietly bandaged. It was a threat that needed to be put down. The aggression kept coming even after Oprah. In December of 2025, when Catherine announced her Together at Christmas concert, Meghan's team deliberately shifted their Netflix holiday special into the exact same scheduling window. Sources say the special had originally been planned for a completely different date, and the move happened only after Catherine's concert was made public. Catherine pulled 8.4 million viewers. Meghan's special was nowhere near the top 10 in the United Kingdom. The audience had delivered its verdict without being asked for one. Sophie had watched every move, the positioning, the physical violations, the slow strangulation of Harry's relationships, the Oprah ambush, the scheduling attack. She had watched a woman walk into one of the oldest institutions on earth, decide its rules were beneath her, reach for the man at the top of it, get rejected, and then spend years trying to burn the whole thing down on her way out. When she realized she could not own the crown, Sophie said, she decided to try and break it. The royal life Meghan had schemed and clawed and maneuvered toward did not quietly fade away. It was ripped from her, and the institution chose the one woman in that family nobody could argue with to make sure the world finally understood exactly why.